King Vorthak stumbled forward, golden blood streaming from his wounds. His magnificent feathers were torn and stained, his proud posture reduced to a hunched crouch. For 3,000 years he had ruled this empire through fear and strength. Now he faced a creature that seemed immune to both. Maya watched him approach the balcony edge where she stood. Her diplomatic uniform was shredded and bloody, but her eyes burned with the same intensity they had held since the moment she realized this had all been a trap. The crystal shard in her hand dripped with alien blood. "You cannot win," King Vorthak wheezed. "Even if you kill me, my fleet will destroy your pathetic colonies. My generals will hunt down every human in the galaxy. Your species will still die." "Maybe," Maya said quietly, "but you won't be there to see it." King Vorthak lunged one final time, his claws reaching for Maya's throat. She sidestepped the desperate attack and grabbed his extended arm. Using his own momentum against him, Maya spun and drove her crystal weapon deep into the base of his skull where it met his spine. The king of the Zephyrian Empire died instantly. His massive body collapsed onto the balcony floor, golden blood, pooling beneath his still form. The ancient crown that had adorned his head for millennia rolled across the crystal surface and came to rest at Maya's feet. Maya picked up the crown and looked down at the dead alien king. 10 minutes ago, she had been a diplomat, hoping to prevent a war. Now, she was a killer, holding the symbol of an empire that had terrorized this sector for 3,000 years. She walked back through the palace corridors, past the bodies of guards, and nobles who had thought humans were nothing more than amusing prey. The few surviving Zephyrians she encountered pressed themselves against the walls and averted their eyes. Word was already spreading through the palace that their god-king was dead. Maya reached the throne room where it had all started. The massive space was eerily quiet now, filled with the bodies of alien warriors and the smell of spilled blood. She walked across the crystal floor where she had been sentenced to death and climbed the steps to King Vorthak's throne. The communication system was built into the throne itself, designed to broadcast the king's voice across the empire. Maya activated it and looked out at the surviving Zephyrians who had crept back into the throne room. Their faces showed a mixture of terror, disbelief, and something that might have been respect. "My name is Maya Rodriguez," she said, her voice echoing through speakers across the Zephyrian homeworld and beyond. "I am a human being from the planet Earth. 10 minutes ago, your king tried to execute me as part of his plan to terrorize my species into surrender." She held up King Vorthak's severed head so that every camera in the throne room could see it clearly. "This is what happened to your king instead." The broadcast was picked up by communication networks throughout the sector. On 100 different worlds, alien species that had lived under Zephyrian rule for centuries watched in amazement as a single human announced the death of their oppressor. "The Zephyrian Empire is finished," Maya continued. "Your fleets can surrender and join the growing Galactic Federation as equals, or they can share their king's fate. The choice is yours." Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the UES Valiant as Zephyrian warships throughout the system began powering down their weapons and requesting permission to negotiate. What had started as a desperate diplomatic mission was ending as the most decisive military victory in human history. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different Zephyrian battle groups. They're asking for terms." Jake stared at the image of Maya on his main screen. This young woman who had somehow turned the tables on an empire that had seemed invincible just hours before. Give them whatever terms they want, and get me a direct line to Earth Command. They're going to want to hear about this. Maya looked out at the surviving Zephyrian nobles in the throne room. These aliens had watched their fellows die without lifting a finger to help. They had cheered when Maya was sentenced to death and had expected to enjoy watching her execution. Now they waited to see what the human killer would do with them. Your empire was built on the idea that the strong have the right to prey on the weak, Maya said. You convinced yourselves that humans were weak because we tried diplomacy instead of conquest. You were wrong about what strength really means. She set King Vorthak's crown on the throne beside her, but did not put it on. Strength is not about who can kill the most enemies or conquer the most worlds. Real strength comes from surviving when everything is against you, from fighting back when there's no hope of victory, from standing up for your people even when you're alone, and you... King Vorthak spread his massive wings and leaped from his throne. His claws scraped against the crystal floor as he landed, each talon longer than Maya's fingers and sharp enough to cut through steel. Golden feathers bristled with rage as he towered over the human who had turned his perfect trap into a slaughter. Maya looked up at the alien king and felt no fear. The diplomatic part of her mind, the part that had spent months learning Zephyrian customs and protocol, was gone. What remained was something much older and more dangerous. Her ancestors had faced saber-toothed cats and cave bears with nothing but stone tools and determination. King Vorthak was bigger than those ancient predators, but he was not more deadly. You think you have won something here, human? The king's voice filled the throne room like thunder. You have only delayed your death by a few minutes. I have ruled this empire for 3,000 years. I have personally killed the leaders of 47 different species. What makes you think one small creature from a backwater world can stand against me? Maya wiped alien blood from her hands and picked up an energy rifle from one of the fallen guards. She checked its charge and found it nearly empty. Around the throne room, the surviving guards and nobles pressed themselves against the walls, too terrified to move but unable to look away from the confrontation between their god-king and the human killer. Your species is about to learn a lesson that every other race in this sector already knows, King Vorthak continued, circling Maya like a predator sizing up its prey. Humans are nothing special. You are just another primitive species that stumbled into space technology before you were ready. Soon you will be extinct, and the galaxy will forget you ever existed. Maya said nothing. She had stopped caring about diplomacy or politics or the fate of human colonies. Her world had narrowed down to this moment, this room, and the alien king, who thought he could threaten her species with impunity. The part of her that might have tried to negotiate or find a peaceful solution had died along with Kyle Chen and his diplomatic team. King Vorthak suddenly lunged forward, his claws sweeping, in a deadly arc that would have taken Maya's head clean off. But she was not there when the blow landed. Maya had dropped and rolled to the side, coming up near the throne with the energy rifle in her hands. She pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The weapon was completely drained. King Vorthak laughed and spread his wings wide, showing off their impressive span. Even your weapons betray you, human. This is destiny. The weak always fall before the strong. Maya threw the useless rifle at his head. The king batted it aside contemptuously and charged again, his claws extended for a killing blow. Maya sprinted toward the far end of the throne room, weaving between the marble pillars as energy blasts from the remaining guards lit up the air around her. The massive doors at the rear of the throne room were sealed shut, but Maya had noticed something during her study of the palace layout. Like most buildings designed by creatures who could fly, the Zephyrian palace had multiple levels connected by open spaces and balconies. She could hear the king's claws clicking on the crystal floor behind her as he gave chase. Maya reached the back wall and began to climb. Her fingers found holds in the decorative carvings that covered every surface. The Zephyrians had built their palace to show off their artistic skills, never imagining that all those beautiful sculptures would become a ladder for a human predator. King Vorthak roared in fury as he watched his prey escape upward. His wings spread wide as he launched himself into the air, soaring up toward the high balconies where Maya was climbing. But the throne room ceiling was designed for ceremony, not combat, and the king's massive wingspan made it hard for him to maneuver. In the enclosed space, Maya reached a narrow balcony and rolled over the railing just as King Vorthak's claws scraped the stone where she had been. She found herself in a corridor lined with tapestries that showed the history of Zephyrian conquests. Scenes of burning cities and defeated armies covered the walls from floor to ceiling. The king crashed into the balcony behind her, his claws tearing chunks out of the crystal railing as he struggled to land properly. Maya was already running down the corridor, looking for anything she could use as a weapon. The Zephyrians had built their palace like a museum, filled with treasures, taken from conquered worlds. Surely there had to be something useful among all the stolen artifacts. She found it in an alcove dedicated to some ancient victory. A ceremonial sword from a long-dead civilization hung in a place of honor, its blade still sharp despite centuries of neglect. Maya grabbed the weapon and tested its balance. It was heavier than she was used to, but it would do. King Vorthak rounded the corner at full speed, his eyes blazing with rage. "There is nowhere to run, human. This palace has 1,000 rooms, but every one of them will become your tomb." Maya turned to face him, the alien sword gleaming in her hands. "Then stop chasing me and fight." The king accepted the challenge with savage joy. His claws met her blade in a shower of sparks as they fought their way down the corridor. Maya had trained in sword work as part of her military education, but she had never faced anything like King Vorthak. The alien king had 3,000 years of combat experience and the natural weapons of an apex predator. But Maya had something the king did not understand: the knowledge that she was already dead. The diplomatic mission had been a trap from the beginning. Her ship was outnumbered and outgunned. Even if she somehow survived this fight, the Zephyrian fleet would hunt down every human colony in the sector. Her species was facing extinction, whether she lived or died in this palace. That knowledge set her free. Maya stopped fighting defensively and began to attack with the reckless fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. Her blade carved bloody lines across King Vorthak's chest and wings. When his claws raked across her arm, she ignored the pain and struck back twice as hard. They fought through 3 corridors and up 2 flights of stairs. King Vorthak's superior reach and strength began to tell as Maya's stolen sword grew heavy in her hands. The king's claws found her shoulder, then her leg, then her ribs. Alien blood mixed with human blood on the crystal floors. But Maya kept fighting. When the sword broke against the king's claws, she picked up a ceremonial mace from another display. When that weapon shattered, she grabbed a shard of crystal and used it like a dagger. Every time King Vorthak thought he had finished her, Maya found some new way to hurt him in return. Commander Lisa Park watched the battle from the UES Valiant high above. The ship's sensors could track Maya's biometric readings through her uniform's monitoring system. Heart rate elevated but steady. Blood pressure high but stable. Brain activity showing the focused intensity of a predator in combat. "She's not just fighting," Lisa whispered to her tactical officer. "She's hunting him." In the palace corridors, King Vorthak finally began to understand what kind of creature he was facing. This human did not fight with honor or follow any recognizable combat doctrine. She used every dirty trick, every environmental advantage, every moment of distraction to inflict more damage. When he expected her to retreat, she attacked. When he thought she was finished, she got back up and hurt him again. Maya drove her, crystal shard deep into the king's thigh, and felt alien blood pour over her hands. King Vorthak screamed and backhanded her across the face, sending her sliding across the floor toward an open balcony. She rolled to her feet at the edge of the precipice and looked back at the wounded alien king. "Impossible," King Vorthak gasped, golden blood streaming from a dozen wounds. "You should be dead. Any reasonable creature would be dead by now." Maya smiled, and for the first time since entering the palace, she looked genuinely happy. That's the thing about humans. We're not reasonable. The first guard reached for Maya with claws that gleamed like razor blades. He moved slowly, confidently, the way a predator approaches prey that cannot possibly fight back. His amber eyes showed amusement rather than caution. After all, what could one small human possibly do against a Zephyrian warrior? Maya caught his wrist and twisted. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the throne room like a gunshot. The guard's confident expression changed to shock, then to screaming agony as Maya continued the motion and drove her elbow into his throat. He collapsed to the crystal floor, his metallic feathers scattering as he gasped for air that would never come. The throne room erupted into chaos. Nobles shrieked and scrambled backward. Other guards raised their weapons but hesitated, afraid to fire with so many important Zephyrians in the line of fire. King Vorthak half rose from his throne, his eyes wide with disbelief. Maya was already moving. The diplomatic briefings had included detailed studies of Zephyrian anatomy, and she remembered every weak point. The second guard lunged at her with his energy weapon, but Maya was no longer where he expected her to be. She rolled under his swing and came up behind him, her hands finding the nerve cluster at the base of his skull. He dropped like a stone. "Kill her!" King Vorthak roared. "Kill the human now!" But killing Maya Rodriguez was proving harder than anyone in that throne room had imagined. The Zephyrians had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that because humans came from a small, unremarkable planet, they must be weak. They had no idea that Earth was what the galactic scientific community classified as a death world. Maya ducked under an energy blast that turned a marble pillar into glowing fragments. Her body moved with fluid efficiency, every motion calculated and precise. The Zephyrians were larger and stronger than humans, but they had evolved on a world with light gravity and gentle weather. Their bones were hollow like birds, designed for flight rather than fighting. Their reflexes were adapted for soaring through clear skies, not for close combat with a predator species. Humans were different. Maya's ancestors had survived ice ages and droughts, predators with claws and teeth, diseases that could kill millions, and natural disasters that could reshape continents. Every human alive was descended from survivors, from creatures tough enough to endure anything a hostile planet could throw at them. The third guard tried to grab Maya from behind, wrapping his wings around her to pin her arms. Maya drove her, head backward into his face, crushing the delicate bone structure around his eyes. As he staggered back, blind and bleeding, she spun and kicked him in the chest. The force of the blow lifted him off his feet and sent him crashing into a group of fleeing nobles. King Vorthak finally understood what was happening in his throne room. This was not an execution. This was a hunt, and the human was not the prey. "Seal the doors," he screamed. "No one leaves until the human is dead." Heavy metal barriers slammed down over all the exits. Energy fields crackled to life across the windows. The throne room became a sealed arena where Maya faced 17 remaining guards and had nowhere to run. But Maya Rodriguez had never planned to run. She grabbed an energy rifle from a fallen guard and tested its weight. The weapon was designed for creatures with hollow bones and was much heavier than it needed to be. Perfect. Maya swung it like a club and shattered the skull of the fourth guard. She kept the momentum going and swept the legs out from under the fifth. The remaining guards began to coordinate their attacks, trying to surround her with overlapping fields of fire. They had finally realized they were not dealing with a helpless diplomat, but with something far more dangerous. Their energy weapons carved burning lines through the air as they tried to pin her down. Maya used the terrain to her advantage. The throne room was designed to impress visitors with its grandeur, filled with statues and pillars and decorative alcoves. She moved between them like a ghost, never staying in one place long enough for the guards to get a clear shot. When she struck, it was always from an unexpected angle, always targeting the weak points that millions of years of evolution had taught her to find. The sixth guard tried to corner her near a statue of some ancient Zephyrian hero. Maya feinted, left, then rolled right and came up with a shard of crystal from the shattered pillar. She drove it deep into the soft flesh under his wing where his heart should be. He fell without a sound. King Vorthak watched in growing horror as his elite guards, warriors who had never known defeat, died one by one at the hands of a creature they had dismissed as harmless. The human moved like death itself, unstoppable and inevitable. Her dress uniform was torn and stained with alien blood, but she showed no signs of slowing down. The 7th and 8th guards tried to attack together, coming at Maya from both sides with energy blades extended. She waited until the last possible second, then dropped flat to the floor. The two Zephyrians collided with each other in a tangle of wings and weapons. Maya rolled between their legs and struck upward with the broken crystal shard, opening both, their throats in one smooth motion. "Impossible," King Vorthak whispered. "This cannot be happening." But it was happening. Maya Rodriguez was doing what humans had always done when faced with impossible odds. She was fighting, not with honor or glory or noble purpose, but with the brutal efficiency of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. The 9th guard tried to use his energy rifle like a spear, lunging at Maya with its glowing tip extended. She sidestepped the thrust and grabbed the weapon, using his own momentum to drive the barrel into his chest. The energy cell overloaded and exploded, filling the air with the smell of burned flesh and melted metal. 10 guards remained, then 9, then 7. Each death came faster than the last, as Maya learned their patterns and exploited their weaknesses. The Zephyrians had trained for aerial combat and formal duels, not for the kind of savage close-quarters fighting that came naturally to a species evolved from persistence hunters. Maya grabbed the 10th guard by his wing and used it as leverage to snap his neck. She dodged the 11th guard's claws and punched through his hollow rib cage to crush his heart. The 12th guard tried to flee and died with Maya's improvised crystal dagger between his shoulder blades. The remaining guards began to back away, their confidence completely shattered. They had come into this throne room expecting to escort a helpless prisoner to execution. Instead, they found themselves facing something that their worst nightmares could not have prepared them for. A human being who had finally stopped pretending to be civilized. King Vorthak rose from his throne, his own claws extended. "If you want something done right," he snarled, "do it yourself." Maya stopped 20 feet from the throne and waited. The protocol demanded that she not speak until King Vorthak acknowledged her presence. The silence stretched on while hundreds of alien eyes watched her every move. She could hear her own heartbeat. In the quiet throne room, King Vorthak finally spoke, his voice deep and harsh like grinding stone. "So this is what humans look like, small and weak, just as our scouts reported. Tell me, little creature, why should the mighty Zephyrian Empire waste time listening to words from such a pathetic species?" Maya kept her voice steady and respectful. "Your Majesty, I come bearing a proposal for peace between our peoples. The human government believes we can find a solution that benefits both the Zephyrian Empire and humanity." The king laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Peace? You speak of peace after your kind destroyed our sacred temple on asteroid Keth 7? Your miners showed no respect for our holy sites. They treated our ancient monuments like common rocks to be crushed and processed." "That was an accident, Your Majesty. Our people had no knowledge of the temple's significance. We are prepared to pay compensation and ensure such mistakes never happen again." "Compensation?" King Vorthak rose from his throne, his massive form casting a shadow over Maya. "What compensation could your primitive species possibly offer that would interest us? Your technology is crude. Your military is weak. Your very existence in our space is an insult to our ancient sovereignty." Maya felt the first stirring of unease. This was not going according to plan. The diplomatic briefings had suggested the Zephyrians might be open to negotiation if approached with proper respect and valuable concessions. Instead, the king seemed determined to be hostile from the start. "Your Majesty, surely there must be something we can discuss. Our species has much to learn from each other. Human science has developed unique approaches to faster-than-light travel and planetary engineering. We could share this knowledge in exchange for peaceful coexistence." "Share?" The king's eyes blazed brighter. "You misunderstand your situation. Completely human. This is not a negotiation. This is not a discussion between equals. You are here because I allow it, and you will leave only if I permit it." Around the throne room, Maya noticed that more guards had quietly entered and taken positions near all the exits. Their weapons were now clearly visible, energy rifles that hummed with barely contained power. The nobles had stopped their whispered conversations and were watching with obvious anticipation. "Where is Ambassador Kyle Chen?" Maya asked suddenly. According to her briefings, Kyle should have arrived here 3 days ago to prepare the groundwork for these talks. His absence had been explained as a minor protocol issue, but now Maya was beginning to suspect something much worse. King Vorthak smiled, showing teeth like polished ivory knives. "Ah, yes, your advanced diplomat. Such a talkative little creature. He had so many interesting things to say about human military capabilities and colony locations. Most educational." "Where is he? Why don't you see for yourself?" The king gestured toward the tall windows that lined the throne room. "Third balcony from the left. I believe he is still wearing his diplomatic uniform, though it is somewhat deteriorated by now. Maya turned and looked toward the windows. At first, she saw only the crystal spires and the purple sky beyond. Then her eyes adjusted, and she saw them. Bodies hung from the palace balconies like grim decorations. Even at this distance, she could make out the dark blue fabric of human diplomatic uniforms. Kyle Chen and his entire team were dead. They hung from the palace walls like trophies, their bodies swaying in the alien wind. Maya felt ice form in her stomach as the full scope of the trap became clear. "You killed our diplomatic mission." "Of course I did. Did you really think I would allow potential spies to wander freely through my palace? Your Ambassador Chen was most cooperative before the end. He told us everything about your pathetic human military forces. 47 colonies spread across 12 star systems, defended by fewer than 200 warships. Quite impressive for such a young species, but hardly a threat to an empire that has conquered half this galaxy." Maya's training kicked in, and she forced herself to stay calm. "The Earth government will consider their deaths an act of war. You have violated every principle of diplomatic immunity and interstellar law." "Interstellar law?" King Vorthak laughed. "Again. Child, we wrote the laws that govern this sector. We have ruled here since before your species learned to make fire. Every civilization that has ever challenged us has ended up decorating our walls or serving in our mines." The king began to pace back and forth in front of his throne, his claws clicking on the crystal floor. "You humans are interesting because you are so deluded. You actually believe you can negotiate as equals with your betters. It would be amusing if it were not so insulting." Maya realized that this had never been a diplomatic mission at all. From the beginning, this was meant to be a trap. The Zephyrians had no intention of making peace. They wanted to capture and kill human representatives to send a message of terror back to Earth. "Here is what will happen next," King Vorthak continued. "You will be taken to the broadcasting chamber where your execution will be recorded and transmitted to every human colony. Your people will see exactly what happens to those who dare to trespass in Zephyrian space. Then your pathetic species will surrender completely, or we will hunt down and exterminate every human in the galaxy." The guards began to move closer, their weapons trained on Maya. She counted at least 20 Zephyrian warriors, each one twice her size and armed with energy weapons that could vaporize a human body in seconds. The nobles in the throne room settled back in their seats, clearly expecting to enjoy the show. "You see, little human, this is how the galaxy really works. The strong take what they want, and the weak provide entertainment before they die. Your species made the mistake of thinking you could be anything other than prey." King Vorthak returned to his throne and sat down with satisfaction. "I admit, I am curious to see how long you will beg for your life once the pain begins. Your Ambassador Chen lasted almost an hour before he told us everything we wanted to know about human defenses." Maya looked around the throne room one more time. 20 armed guards, hundreds of watching nobles, no weapons of her own, no backup coming, no way out except through enemies who had already proven they enjoyed killing humans. The diplomatic mission was over. Everything she had trained, for everything she had hoped to accomplish, had been a lie from the beginning. The Zephyrians had never intended to negotiate. They had simply wanted to lure human representatives into a trap where they could be captured, tortured, and murdered for the entertainment of the alien court. But as the guards moved closer and King Vorthak continued his speech about human weakness and Zephyrian superiority. Maya Rodriguez began to remember other parts of her training, the parts that had nothing to do with diplomacy. Maya Rodriguez stepped off the transport ship and felt her boots touch the cold metal platform. The air here tasted different, sharp and clean like mountain air back home. She looked up at the massive crystal towers that reached into the purple sky. This was the Zephyrian homeworld, and she was the first human to ever stand on its surface. She wore her best dress uniform, dark blue with silver buttons that caught the light from the twin suns overhead. No weapons hung from her belt. No armor covered her body. The Zephyrians had been very clear about their rules. Anyone who came to meet their king must come unarmed and alone. Maya carried only a small data pad with the peace treaty terms that Earth wanted to discuss. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the UES Valiant, far above in orbit. He pressed his face against the viewing window and tried to see the tiny figure of Maya on the planet below. His hands shook a little as he gripped the metal rail. This mission could save both their peoples from a terrible war, or it could be the start of something much worse. Maya walked forward along the crystal pathway that led to the palace. Strange music played from hidden speakers, high and sharp like bird songs. The path was smooth under her feet, made from some kind of blue stone that seemed to glow from within. On both sides, tall plants with silver leaves swayed in the alien wind. Everything here was beautiful, but it felt cold and empty too. The Zephyrians had first contact with humans 6 months ago when their scout ships found human colonies on the edge of this sector. At first, both sides had tried to be friendly. The aliens seemed curious about these new creatures who had somehow learned to travel between the stars. But things went wrong fast when human miners accidentally damaged a Zephyrian sacred site on an asteroid. The bird-like aliens declared this an act of war. Maya remembered the briefings back on Earth. The Zephyrians were an old race that had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. They looked like giant birds with metallic feathers and sharp claws that could cut through steel. They were proud and fierce, and they had never lost a war. Most alien species in this sector either served them or stayed far away. The humans were different. They were new to this part of space, and they had no idea how powerful the Zephyrians really were. When the alien ultimatum came demanding total surrender, the human government decided to try diplomacy first. They chose Maya for this mission because she was young and seemed harmless. The hope was that the Zephyrians would see her as no threat and maybe listen to what she had to say. Maya had trained for months to prepare for this day. She learned the Zephyrian language and studied their customs. She practiced walking in their strange gravity and breathing their thin air. Most importantly, she memorized every detail of the peace proposal that might prevent a war neither side could really win. As she walked toward the palace, Maya thought about her family back home. Her parents lived in a small town in Texas where her father grew corn and her mother taught school. They were proud of their daughter who had joined the diplomatic corps, but they worried about her traveling so far from Earth. Maya had promised them she would come home safe. The palace grew larger as she got closer. It was made entirely of crystal and metal, with spires that twisted up into the sky like frozen lightning. Windows reflected the purple sunlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Guards stood at every entrance, tall Zephyrian warriors with golden feathers and weapons that hummed with energy. Maya reached the main gate and stopped. A guard stepped forward, twice as tall as she was. His feathers gleamed like polished metal, and his eyes were the color of amber. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind through trees. "Human female, you will follow the path to the throne room. You will not speak unless King Vorthak gives you permission. You will not move unless told to do so. Any violation of protocol will result in immediate execution." Maya nodded and walked through the gate. Inside, the palace was even more impressive. The walls were covered with carvings that told the story of Zephyrian victories over dozens of alien races. Statues of fallen enemies lined the corridors, their faces frozen in expressions of fear and defeat. The message was clear: the Zephyrians always won. Other aliens moved through the hallways, all of them clearly servants or slaves. They kept their eyes down when Maya passed and pressed themselves against the walls as if afraid to be noticed. Some looked like they had once been proud warrior races, now reduced to cleaning floors and carrying messages for their bird-like masters. The throne room doors were massive, made of black metal with silver designs that showed scenes of battle and conquest. 2 more guards stood beside them, their claws resting on the handles of energy weapons. They watched Maya approach with eyes that held no warmth or curiosity, only cold evaluation. Maya took a deep breath and tried to calm her racing heart. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If she could convince King Vorthak to listen to reason, both humans and Zephyrians might avoid a war that would cost millions of lives. If she failed, the human colonies would be destroyed, and Earth itself might face invasion. The guards opened the doors, and Maya walked into the throne room. The space was huge, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows far above. Hundreds of Zephyrian nobles filled the room, their feathers rustling as they turned to stare at the human intruder. At the far end, on a throne made of crystal and bone, sat King Vorthak the Eternal. The king was larger than any Zephyrian Maya had seen, with feathers that shifted from gold to deep red in the strange light. His claws were longer than her fingers, and his eyes burned like hot coals. When he looked at her, Maya felt like a small animal being studied by a hungry predator. Maya walked forward across the polished floor, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. The Zephyrian nobles whispered among themselves, their voices creating a sound like wind through dry leaves. She could feel their contempt and amusement. To them, she was nothing more than an amusing curiosity, a soft creature from a backward world who thought she could negotiate with their mighty king.